Hi, good evening, and welcome to Transistance, your weekly news and commentary show that touches upon all of the things around the world that are of interest and intersection with the transgender, non binary, non conforming, and intersex community, as well as the wider Two Spirit LGBTQIAP community. I'm one of your hosts, Genevieve Bergman.
Oh, is it my turn? Hi, I'm Marla, and I just realized that I put on the wrong lipstick. Strong start.
So, this is now Transistance, your weekly news and commentary show with makeup tips and advice.
How you doing, Jeannie?
I'm doing well. How are you doing, Marla?
I am doing just fine. Olive just decided the second we started that she's gonna be like, "Hey, I need rubs. Come here, come here,
Wonderful. Um,
Mimi."
So tonight, as we kind of deal with a lot of different news and issues that have been coming out, you're going to see some different formatting tonight. So just kind of help us out by being a little patient as we kind of work through some of these new transitions and things like that. But we start with our first story, which actually begins on a positive note. Two, not just one, but two Republican governors actually vetoed anti-transgender sports bills in two different states. The governors of Indiana and Utah both came right out and said that they would not support these bills. The governor of Indiana vetoed the bill, saying that it did not provide a consistent statewide policy for what could be called fairness in K through 12 sports, which is a great statement and very glad that the governor did that. But really, we wanted to turn especially to Utah because Utah's governor was super very clear on why he did not want this bill. And the governor made a statement that I won't read the whole thing. It is a long letter, but if you want to go online, you can find the governor's post. But what the governor came down to in Utah was that in the state of Utah, there were 75,000 school athletes. Only 4 of those were transgender players. And of those 4, only 1 was a transgender girl playing on a girls' team. Now, the governor went on to say that 4 kids who are just trying to find some friends and feel like they are a part of something, 4 kids trying to get through each day, rarely has so much fear and anger been directed at so few. I don't understand what they are going through or why they feel the way they do, but I want them to live. Again, this is a GOP governor from Utah who came out and said these bills are doing nothing but instilling fear and leading to the deaths of transgender children.
Yeah, I mean, I think it might be the first time I've actually heard a conservative admit that the suicide rate for transgender people, just in general, is a result of being treated like garbage, being treated
Yeah.
inhuman. It's the first time I've ever heard someone in the GOP actually make
Yeah.
that claim.
Now, as wonderful as the statement from the governor was and the veto, the Utah lawmakers went back and overrode the governor's veto. Republican lawmakers had enough votes to circumvent the legislation, so now it is still going to go into effect as of July 1st, and that transgender students will not be allowed to participate in K through 12. But having what the governor said on record is, I think, a huge step in being able to kind of boost the recognition that maybe the GOP is not following their own family values mentality.
That's a high hope that I really can't. I don't know. I can't believe for a moment that they're going to stick to that. I mean, this is one governor compared to how many senators, how many members of the House,
I know.
that voted in favor of it. And even after being told by a leader in their own party, hey, this is going to kill people, they were like, why do I care?
Right. And and you make a valid point. I mean, the legislators do not care that the facts and the statistics are there to support everything that the governor said. They just want to push these through as a way to increase their voting base and to be able to get themselves reelected, or pick this up as a battle cry and be able to use that to bolster their own campaigns in the coming days.
I
We also
mean,
have two other states who have passed things that are just nasty.
yeah.
Arizona and Oklahoma have both passed bills that will limit transgender rights for certain people. Oklahoma was another school sports, whereas the Arizona bill that was passed bans gender affirming surgery for minors. Now, we all know the story. They don't do that. But an earlier version of this bill would have banned puberty blockers or any type of hormone treatment for minors. Luckily, it was amended to get that out. Yet, what they were able to do was they were able to pass a bill that has zero bite because nobody was doing gender affirming surgeries on minors.
Yeah. It's for show. It's to make people believe that this is actually a thing that happens. They're not going to go research it. Because that's what they think of trans people. They hear trans people, they think of surgery.
Yeah.
So they will now be like, "Oh, they're doing surgeries on kids," and then they'll be angry about it, and it'll allow them to try and pass what they wanted to pass to begin with.
Yeah.
At some point. It's so transparent. Unfortunately, a huge percent of this country doesn't care to learn.
No, they don't. And just like everybody loves to come at me and say, well, DNA this, and you don't believe in DNA that. And I'm like, okay, so let's talk DNA. Let's talk about what that is and what that means. And if you don't understand DNA better than your junior high biology class, then don't come and talk to me about it, because it takes more understanding of DNA than just DNA is the building blocks of life.
Yeah. I mean, I keep having to have this. It's my new thing is when they're like, define woman, which is them all just trying to be Matt Walsh.
Right.
And I'll go, why don't you define woman first? Since, I'm going to have to give a long, nuanced, and, well thought out discussion. And you're going to just put up what you copied and pasted from
Matt Walsh.
Merriam-Webster. And, and they'll say an adult human female. And then I'll go, define female.
Mm-hmm.
And sure enough, they cannot give me a definition that isn't woman or is an incorrect definition of female, because they have no idea how sex works. They have no idea how phenotypes work. They think that gender, or sex rather, is based on chromosomes. It is not. It is purely based on what a doctor perceives your phenotype to be at birth. We don't karyotype babies when they're born.
Right. And I mean, to even go beyond that, define adult.
Define what?
Adult.
Yeah.
That's the one that bugs me. So a woman is an adult female. Define an adult. Because right now, the age of an adult around the world is anywhere between 8 and 28, depending on the definition of adulthood. And I'm like, so, do you really want to go there?
I mean, if you can't, yeah. I mean, it's just, I think we've taught people to be too reliant on dictionaries. Like, I
Okay.
mean, I was taught by fourth grade you don't start an essay with Merriam-Webster defines blank as da 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 da, because that's reductionist. It's,
Mhm.
it doesn't show a good understanding of the subject. It is literally a quick reference for you to understand something that you have never heard before.
Yeah, it's wild. It's wild that we have to have these conversations. But again, critical thinking and the teaching of how to be a critical thinker has been on the decline for the last 20 years, 25 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so people do not have that capacity to be able to critically think through something. They have to rely on spoon fed data and information, or else they will not be able to form an opinion. It is not an informed opinion, it is a spoon fed opinion, but they still cannot form an opinion because they were not taught how to think critically.
Yeah.
And that's part of the reason why we present this information, is so that people can see the information that is out there that's not being discussed in the wider news, and be able to put these things together for themselves on whether or not it's something they want to agree with.
Yeah.
All right. For those of you who may not be nearly as old as me, you may not remember that in 1972, the Equal Rights Amendment passed through Congress. And it went to the states to be ratified. Unfortunately, it's not been ratified yet. Now, the Equal Rights Amendment was originally an effort to create equality for women in the culture of that time, because we were just coming out of the cultural revolution of the 60s, the civil rights movement of the 50s and 60s. We were becoming a group of people who began to see that equal rights were a necessary part of moving forward as a country. 50 years later, it's still not been accepted as an amendment within an amendment to the Constitution of the United States. But there is now a push to have the Equal Rights Amendment finalized and put through the final states to see if we can get approval on this. The interesting thing is that at this point, thanks to the recent Supreme Court case of Bostock versus Clayton County, the Equal Rights Amendment would include sexual orientation and gender identity. The Equal Rights Amendment would guarantee equality for all people, not just based on gender or sex or race. It would be equality for all people. Now, we're not talking about Title IX. This is an amendment to the United States Constitution that would provide equality at every level of federal law, so that women, minorities, LGBTQ plus people would be under the protection of federal law in their workplace, public schools, housing, credit opportunities, juries, federally funded programs, and public accommodations. If you hear anybody talking about the Equal Rights Amendment or the ERA, please take note that this is something that would be very important for us to have it ratified by the country. This would bring a new statement into the Constitution of the United States, thus creating a more equitable country to live in.
So, is religion's not included in this, right?
No.
That's what I thought. That's just wanted to make sure. I'm sure they're going to try. They would love to get that in there.
Well, and that's the thing, is that these religious exemption bills are also being passed through the state legislatures. And that is something that we also have to keep an eye on, because it doesn't specifically say trans or gay or anything of that sort, but it does talk about religious exemptions. And on the surface, you think, well, yeah, no, that's not what they're wanting. What they're wanting is an exemption from federal law so that they can discriminate against LGBTQ plus people.
Yeah. So, remind me again, is this one of those situations where it's been so long since I've taken a civics course? What needs to be done? Is this one of those things where you need to have a certain amount of states ratify it?
Yeah, the states have to ratify it at this point.
Which
I
is
can't remember
by
exactly.
state numbers and doesn't actually matter on the amount of representation in the state, correct?
Correct. It is the actual state. Each state would have its own ratification action that they would have to vote on, and so everybody would go to the polls and vote on a United States constitutional amendment.
I don't have high hopes, but I mean, as long as, Democrats have to make sure that they are selling this as, any Republican stands against it, Democrats need to be like, I thought you wanted equality. I thought you wanted, everyone to be treated the same. I thought that's what you keep saying. You don't want labels and people to be, separated. And you just want to. So, yeah, I mean, we have to just sell it the right way.
Yeah. Autumn, I think you're correct. I think 38 states have ratified it to this point. Mm-hmm. It is a matter of having the other 12s, as well as, I believe, I don't know if Puerto Rico has to or Washington, D.C. has to, but I do know that the other 12 states do have to have a vote to ratify.
Can only hope. I've been saying we need federal protections for a long time.
Yeah. Especially given the next news item that's coming up.
Yeah.
Former GOP state representative and current gubernatorial candidate from Mississippi, Robert Foster, posted this on the internet in a public space. To those adults that groom children into dressing like the opposite sex, telling them they can be a different sex, encouraging them to take hormone treatments to transition, and ultimately have surgery to remove their sex organs, I propose they be given the death penalty. Why the firing squad specifically? First and foremost, I'm a Southern gentleman, and it's a very efficient and civilized way of disposing of evil. Secondly, it would be too costly and time-consuming to fly them all high up over the Gulf of Mexico and push them out of a helicopter. Adult groomers of transgendered children are all pedophiles. Pedophiles deserve the death penalty.
I'm going to tell you right now, as much as I want to make a TikTok about this, I don't think there's any chance I could put this up without my video being taken down.
Oh, holy no. No, there's no way this could be used on TikTok.
Yeah. Which says a lot.
Right. Exactly. I mean, it's bad enough it went out on Twitter.
Has Twitter taken it down, done anything?
I want to say that yes, it took it down. Yeah. Twitter removed his tweets.
Did they not remove his whole account? The man just threatened gendercide. So, how do you keep an account after that? I'm so sick of this.
Well, here's his follow-up. Some of y'all want to try and find political compromise with those that want to groom our school-age children and pretend men are women. I think they need to be lined up against a wall before a firing squad to be sent to an early judgment.
So very Christian.
Yeah.
This person should be arrested.
I don't know that he can be. Not for these statements. I mean, I know, Marla, I know what you're saying. But he's in Mississippi. I don't think that they have hate crime for LGBTQ plus people.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is as horrible as his words are. He is still covered under state and federal law, sadly. Now, I do know a couple of states where he could be held accountable, and I do know that there are a couple of countries where he could be thrown in prison for this. Emily, real quick, we did not coin gendercide, sadly. It was actually coined during the feminist movement of the 80s.
Which I asked you about, and you informed me about immediately last week. And I was like, never knew that. Learn something new every day. Even Marla learns new things.
What?
Do we have any sports things? Because I learned something very interesting.
We did have some sports items, I think.
All right, hopefully we'll get to it. If not, like, I'm gonna make a video about it tomorrow. But I found something incredible.
Well, let's get through some of this stuff.
Yeah.
Switching over to our favorite politician, Marjorie Taylor Greene. Marjorie, in all of her wisdom and knowledge and intelligence, had this to say. As a woman, I feel threatened because biological men are aggressively replacing women. All of my life as an American woman, I've been equal in every place to men, but not anymore.
Let me just make sure everyone knows Jeannie did not misspeak. God. I mean, first of all, the grammar. Second of all, what world is she living in where she thinks that as a woman she's been treated equally to men?
Well, she is from Georgia. And in Georgia, their equality is handed to them by their men. So she has definitely been treated equally in Georgia.
Jesus Christ. I mean, I would just be like, even as a cis woman, I would be like, what world are you living
in? Yeah. And by the way, yes, she did write in her tweet, all my life as an American woman.
Marjorie, are you saying you're two women? Are you saying you identify as one or more women? Marjorie, you can't do that. Do you expect us to use plural pronouns for you?
She's. We'll call her she's, hers. But yeah, Marjorie is definitely on a roll, because after attacking the biological men who are aggressively replacing women, which, by the way, I don't know of any women who have been replaced. But anyway, she went on to say at a speech in Georgia that U.S. Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg and his husband, they need to stay out of girls' bathrooms.
People applauded.
All right.
People applauded.
Right. She said, you know what? Pete Buttigieg can take his electric vehicles and his bicycles, and he and his husband can stay out of our girls' bathrooms. And she was loving every minute of it. And people, yeah, as Marla said, people were cheering and yeah. This lady is doing everything by the Republican playbook. She just forgot to read the first chapter that says, "Don't make us look like an idiot."
But what does it matter? They either they don't understand, or they'll twist it in some way to make it like add up in their head. Like, what is? You could say anything. These are the people that cheered when Trump said, "I love the poorly educated."
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, Opal, don't look. I can't pronounce the man's name. I'm sorry. It's not something that I can do. So give me a break just a little bit. I'm from the South. Those vowels don't go together like that. So, okay. Um, sort of. So let me do this breaking news. We need to get a breaking news thing, Emily.
Is that like a news ticker? I don't know if that was.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, um, basically, just this afternoon, Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida signed Florida's Don't Say Gay bill. And while we all knew that was coming, the photo op for this is disgusting. The photo op that he made this into is something that is just horrible. As he signed the bill, he was at Classical Preparatory School in Spring Hill, Florida, flanked by children in their school uniforms holding signs that said, "Protect children, support parents." At least one of the kids in the background had a pin with CRT and then crossed out.
Oh, dear God.
The imagery on this is despicable, y'all, because I don't like going back to it, but pull up some of the Hitler youth photography and go back and look and see what that looks like. This bill is already being pushed into challenges, legal challenges, to try and get it overturned in the courts. But as of right now, the Don't Say Gay bill is passed in Florida, all the way into law.
I have nothing to say. Ron DeSantis, I hope you sink into the ocean with the rest of your fucking state.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Another big news item, and this is really kind of something on the plus side, has been the confirmation hearing for Judge Katanji Brown Jackson for the Supreme Court. Now, if you've been following any of this, you know that basically Judge Jackson has been on a constant defensive from GOP. Republicans who are just constantly trying to push an agenda instead of actually trying to talk with this person who's going to be confirmed to the Supreme Court. Senator Marsha Blackburn from Tennessee said that, well, she used her opening statement as basically a rant and said that, you okay, Emily? Okay.
Right, we've lost our control booth.
She just walked out. Wow. After having said that it would be a very respectful hearing, Senator Blackburn accused Judge Jackson of endorsing progressive indoctrination of children. Basically said that she was alarmed that Jackson is on the board of a school that she claimed teaches kindergartners 5-year-old children that they can choose their gender and teaches them about so-called white privilege. And she just goes on and on and on to basically rant about trans sports, never really getting to the point of asking a legitimate question about all of this stuff that she's talking about. Sorry, Massey, you have to claim her. She is one of your senators. You want to make any comments on that one? Or are you saving it for some?
Me?
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many. Okay, there's definitely things like I have to say about what else she said and what Ted Cruz said.
Right.
Just.
Well, I was going to take them one by one, but if you want me to cover all of them, and then we can just rake all of them over the coals.
No, let's take it one by one.
Okay.
I just she also said that trans women having right, like she inferred that the cisgender girls' voices don't matter. Like, what about transgender girls' voices? Like, you know, the ones who have a much higher discrimination rate.
Okay. But again, you're giving her the credit of
caring, being a
you're
human,
giving her the credit of recognizing
empathy,
transgender girls as legitimate girls.
people.
What she says is educators are allowing biological males to steal opportunities from female athletes.
Like who? Like to begin with, like who says? You know, anyone who says that to begin with, anyone who uses the term I literally, my entire filter for TikTok has now become biological male, biological female, biological male. Like, I'm just sick of it. Anyone who uses that term is a transphobe. But who uses that term, especially in relation to children? Who calls a young child a biological male or a biological female?
Right. I know. You and I know that. So Ted Cruz, senator from Texas, if you don't know this wonderful peach of a person, asked this question. Well, he stated this first. He said, I'm an Hispanic man. Could I decide I was an Asian man? Would I have the ability to be an Asian man and challenge Harvard's discrimination because I made that decision? Now, that comment comes right around talking about how I can decide to be a woman and then 10 minutes later decide not to be that. And so becomes very dismissive of transgender people in two different ways.
Mm-hmm. I mean, first of all, my response to that kind of like statement is always like, no, you don't understand. I'm half woman on my mother's side. That's
Right.
always like it's not the same fucking thing. Like literally, like our anatomy, our bodies, our genetic codes are coded for both sexes and anything in between. You know, it's why when we take hormones, we grow breasts. It's why anyone who is assigned male at birth, you know, and hasn't had bottom surgery has a seam running down their scrotum. I was trying to do a word that TikTok and Twitter or Twitter.
We can use biological words because this is an educational program.
Yeah.
Thank you, TikTok. This is for educational purposes only.
By the way, if you ever want to make like a super toxic masculine person feel real bad, just remind them that seam is a fused labia. And here's the thing: she answered perfectly. What are you laughing about?
I'm laughing at Emily. Emily is just in rapt attention down there, and I'm like, oh my God. Yes, we do have production cameras so that we can see Emily in her little control booth in her bedroom, and all of the naughty things that she's doing when she can't be on camera.
So, but Katanji Brown Jackson responded perfectly, you know, basically saying, you know, she's not going to accept essentially saying she's not going to accept simple hypotheticals like that. Cases are complex and have elements and backgrounds and context and all this stuff. If that were not the case, we wouldn't need a Supreme Court. All we would need is a computer to be like, yes or no.
Exactly. Okay, another senator from Texas, John Cornyn, wanted to bring religion into the conversation and made this question something that Jackson had to respond to. Do you, and for a moment, I'll let you figure out how that's a forced thing. Do you see that when the Supreme Court makes a dramatic pronouncement about the invalidity of state marriage laws, that it will inevitably set in conflict between those who ascribe to the Supreme Court's edict and those who have a firmly held religious belief that marriage is between a man and woman? To which Jackson responded she couldn't comment because there are currently cases dealing with that subject in the courts. She cannot speak on those. To which Senator Cornyn from the benches said, I'm not asking you to decide a case. I'm just asking, isn't it apparent that when the Supreme Court decides that something that is not even in the Constitution is a fundamental right, and no state can pass any law that conflicts with the Supreme Court's edict, particularly in an area where people have sincerely held religious beliefs, doesn't that necessarily create a conflict between what people may believe is a matter of their religious doctrine or faith and what the federal government says is the law of the land?
I'm so tired of Republicans treating the Constitution as if it were the tablets brought down from Mount Sinai and like could never change, is made perfectly for all of humanity for all of time. It's a living, breathing document. These were these very, not that they were completely narrow-minded, but these were, white men who, don't have the understanding of the world that we have now.
Right.
They couldn't have foreseen everything that was to come. And it boggles my mind that people can honestly believe that the Constitution allows, what the Constitution allows you to do is say, that's my religion stops me from doing that. It does not allow for you to say, my religion stops you from doing that.
Oh, yeah.
And how anyone can think it's the first one is so completely un-American and
right.
so completely against liberty.
Yeah. And that's what Judge Jackson responded with. She's like, well, that's the nature of a right, that when there is a right, it means that there are limitations on regulation, even if people are regulating pursuant to their sincerely held religious beliefs. There's still limitation on that. She said she explained to him that it's not a violation of anyone's religion and the freedom thereof to not be able to take other people's rights away. And that's one of the great fallacies that the church is working on right now within America. Christianity, in so many of its forms, are working on the basis of the idea that they get the permission to be exempt from the law to take away the rights of other people who have equal standing in the law. But it's like, well, no, because the Constitution grants us freedom of religion. True, but it also grants everybody else freedom from religion. It is a two-way street. It is left vague and very unintentional just for that very reason, to be able to define it in a context that is constantly shifting. It was written as a reaction to the Church of England and its assimilation with the throne of England, because the king at that time was not only the king of the country, but also was the chief head of the Church of England. Both were then used as instruments to manage and suppress people. The writers of the Constitution wanted to remove that ability of legal and political power and religious power to form together against the people. So they said that there is not going to be any formal recognition of a religion, nor is there going to be a limitation of people to practice their religion. That intentional, semi-contradictory statement was to be used in a context that was constantly shifting, because when the United States were being founded, when the Constitution was being written, there was not one church offering religious leadership within the country. It was a collection of denominations that represented Protestant as well as a Catholic church tradition. In addition, there were Jewish members of the country also involved. So it's not like we were only talking about Christianity. Those people of that time recognized that there was a diversity of religion within that newly formed country, and they had to create a way that a dynamic movement between those two poles was guaranteed within the Constitution.
Very well put. I have nothing to add.
Sorry, the historian came out.
Where are we going next?
Marsha Blackburn asked Judge Jackson, can you provide a definition for the word woman?
Did she talk to Matt Walsh before the hearing?
I guess so, yeah. And I love Judge Jackson's response. She says, I can't. Not in this context. I'm not a biologist. And I love that comment. It's like, put it back in their face. You want to talk about biology? Great. Ask a biologist.
Yeah.
She's not a biologist. She's a judge. And she had their number. And I think, no matter if Judge Blackburn is confirmed for the Supreme Court, it does not matter. She was a representation of every marginalized group of people out there right now who is taking crap from these people who want to continue to oppress and support a white privileged, white superiority mentality. I support Judge Jackson wholeheartedly, and I hope that she changed the fucking world.
I just hope she makes them cry at this point. I know she's going to change the world. I just want to see them cry about it.
Yeah, I agree. I would love to see Ted Cruz just breaking down in tears.
I'm sure Ted Cruz goes home and cries every single night about what a sad little man he is.
Side note, did you see his temper tantrum?
Are we talking about racist baby, or is this something else?
No, this is something else.
No.
He was in...
Oh, are you talking about the airport?
Yeah, he was in Montana. And I don't know why the senator from Texas was in Montana, but he had to get back for the hearing, and he was late. And the airline said, tough, you're not getting on the plane. And basically, he almost did a full-blown Karen in saying, do you know who I am? And yeah, this was, they called security on him. And that was, I think, the funniest thing in this whole thing.
I would have given anything for this man to have ended up on the no-fly list.
Oh. Can you imagine the audacity of what he would have to say after that? I can only imagine how quickly he would come out and talk about his heritage and being discriminated against as a minority, because that is who he is. And I can hear him saying it.
Only when it suits him.
Yeah.
The wasn't there a politician from Alaska who I think maybe from the January 6th riots ended up on the no-fly list and couldn't get, however she had to get to the Capitol required plane, and
Right.
she couldn't get on the plane anymore.
Yeah, I think it was. I think it was a representative from Alaska, and she ended up getting. I don't know if it was that or Montana or up in that area, but it was one of the conservative representatives from up in that area. They had ties to the January 6th insurrection, and yeah, they were put on the no-fly, and it's like, gotta love it. You gotta love it.
Are we skipping Racist Baby? Did we decide to skip Racist Baby?
Do y'all want to do those?
I just want to discuss something about Racist Baby, and I'm probably going to make a TikTok about it tonight.
Okay.
But if no one saw, I'll just do it quickly.
Okay.
If no one saw Ted Cruz literally put up fucking slides of this book called Anti-Racist Baby, and essentially the book says that racism is not born into you, like it's learned, which is a fact. And Ted Cruz put up all these little slides to ask Judge Jackson, are babies racist? Completely missing the point of the book.
Yeah.
I'm going to make this TikTok. Nobody steal it. But there is a song in the 1949 musical South Pacific called You've Got to Be Carefully Taught. It's the same exact message of this book. Racism isn't born into you. It comes after that. 1949, when this song came out and that show came out, people were throwing a fucking fit over that message. And a state that I won't mention, Georgia.
Sorry, you got that little cough there. Do you need some water?
Oh, yeah. Attempted to pass a law banning any such messaging in entertainment. Why the hell does it sound like Ted Cruz has not left 1949? This was a discussion that in 1949 people looked at these congressmen from Georgia and went, what the fuck is wrong with you?
Yeah. And here's the thing. I mean, let's roll this back and say, okay, so it's not just Ted Cruz, though. It is these religious groups, these Christian groups who want to restore a golden era 1950s mentality of the woman's place is in her home, taking care of the children. The man goes out and makes a living and provides for his family, and then everything else stays behind the walls of the house. And the reality is that the golden age of the 50s was basically one great effort to cover up a whole bunch of lies.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
let's build this suburban monument to whiteness where we can stay away from everybody else and pretend the world's great and pretend, everyone's having a great time here in America.
Yep. And create this false image that everybody is equal, everybody is taken care of, everybody has the same rights. And the 50s broke into the 60s, and the 60s showed us that we live in a broken country. We live in a broken society here. And from the 60s through the 70s, we continued to try and push that reality that it is a broken society. We get into the 80s, the Republicans come back, and it's like, hey, everybody can have what they want. And this false sense of equity came about because it was an age of excess, and people could basically get whatever they wanted, except for those who were below the poverty lines.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's still taken us a couple of decades to break out of the 80s mentality, but go back and look and listen to who these Republicans are hearkening back to. They want to go back to Reagan. They want to go back to that, era of when, there was a car in every garage and everybody had a garage.
Trump wanted to go back to Andrew Jackson.
Okay. I'm not going there, so that won't get me started, and I don't want to go there.
I just want to point out Ted Cruz that Ted Cruz has propelled that book to #1 on Amazon's bestseller list.
That is amazing. I love it. I love it. I love it. And I hope that the authors will make a special edition that they now give away free to every school.
With Ted Cruz's picture right inside the cover.
Oh yes, a special acknowledgement inside the cover. Many thanks to the one who made it all possible. All right, hopping out of politics and into bigger news, things happening around the world. Amazon is not going to be a part of this year's Pride event in Seattle. Of course, Seattle being one of the places in the U.S. where LGBTQ plus lives are a little more equitable. And so Pride is going to be something that is, celebrated with great, festivity. The Seattle Pride organization released a statement saying that it was no longer partnering with organizations seeking to make a token gesture known as rainbow washing their reputation during Pride. And one of the organizations that they specifically called out was Amazon. Amazon was going to give them $100,000 for Seattle Pride, but they also wanted naming rights so that it would be renamed as Seattle Pride Parade presented by Amazon. Based on government transparency research, what was discovered was that Amazon had donated more than $450,000 to members of Congress who have voted against the Equality Act. Now, this is not the same as the ERA, the amendment. The Equality Act is designed to bring added protections for sexual orientation and gender level to the federal organization. But $450,000 was what Amazon gave to members of Congress who voted against that.
What is there to say? It's Amazon. Is anyone fucking surprised? Did Amazon have like any statement of apology or?
I've not read anything yet. I've not read anything yet.
I'm so tired of these companies like Disney. Same thing. It's like we support LGBTQ people, but we're gonna hedge our bets and give a lot of money to the other side as well.
Yeah. Now, over on TikTok, Survivor Strength asks this question, and I think it's a fair question for us to discuss as this is a commentary show. Are you telling me I can't get stuff from Amazon anymore? And this is a huge, huge issue. Do we really allow Amazon to know with our dollars that what they are doing is unacceptable?
I really anything. Amazon has gotten to a point where I don't know if anything short of like at least 30% of the population agreeing not to buy from them would actually hurt them. At this point, we have gotten so fucking far out of control. And yes, I do suggest you buy things from independent sellers in general. I know Amazon is convenient, but we lived without it for a long time. You can walk to the pharmacy or whatever. I'm not saying you have to do that. We are at a point with Amazon where the only reasonable answer is to use the antitrust laws should have been used on them half a decade ago.
Okay. I think that's fair. Um, yeah, Rosa points out very clearly that we do have to make the statement that Amazon is the primary owner of this streaming network, and so Twitch is a subsidiary of the Amazon company. So, just putting that out there, that if we stop supporting Amazon, we stop using Twitch. That could be a bit of a problem for the Transverse. For Marla and I, no, we just go wherever we can. We're mercenaries at this point, or privateers. Privateers, I prefer that.
Emily, I'll leave so goddamn quick you won't even know what happened.
Oh, damn, y'all! It's getting ugly over here. By the way, I do believe that the United States has officially recognized privateering again. First time since 1812 or 1814. What? Yes. The United States, if I remember correctly, somebody in the United States says that it is possible to go ahead and raid the seafaring vessels of Russian oligarchs. And
I did read this.
Yeah. And so basically what they did is, by stating that, we now have the reinstitution of privateering.
Listen, people spent so much time during the pandemic playing Sea of Thieves, practicing for this moment. They're gonna get their party together. They're gonna get their boat.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, maybe we need to do the same thing with Amazon. I don't know. Down to Texas, everybody's favorite place for transgender holidays. Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton, who is just an amazing piece of work, has gotten a bit angry because a Texas school was celebrating Pride Week.
Oh no.
For the past 8 years, students in the Austin Independent School District have held a district-wide Pride Week as a chance to celebrate LGBTQ plus students, staff, and families in the district. Ken Paxton, though, sent a letter to the school district calling Pride Week sex education and notifying the school that without parental consent, the celebration is breaking the law. The Texas legislature, he said, has made it clear that when it comes to sex education, parents, not school districts, are in charge. So, basically, he is wielding a hammer that comes right out and says, we're going to not allow any pride events in schools. But that's not all that this wonderful piece of humanity said. He went on to say that it violates state law because your curriculum and lesson plans deal head-on with sexual orientation and gender identity, topics that are unmistakably constitute human sexuality instruction. And then went on to say that he called such things controversial and sensitive, and decried possible community circles where students could have group discussions on sensitive topics. By hosting Pride Week, your district has at best undertaken a week-long instructional effort in human sexuality without parental consent, or worse, your district is cynically pushing a week-long indoctrination of your students that not only fails to obtain parental consent, but subtly cuts parents out of the loop. Either way, you are breaking the state law.
Okay. I have an idea. They just make it Transgender Awareness Week so that when he cries about this again and says it's sex education, and tries to bring that to a court, any court who brings forward sociologists, biologists, whatever, will inform them that that is not sex education. And as far as I know, they don't have anything in their books about gender education.
Yes, they do.
They do?
The laws are written so that it includes sexual orientation and gender identity.
I
But it
never
is
want to
called
see
human
a fucking.
sexuality.
I never want to see gendered uniforms in another fucking school again. I never want to see classes split up, boys, girls, and anything. I don't want to see girls, toys, and boys. I'm fucking so sick of this hypocrisy of them thinking they're the default.
Yeah. Now, the last bit of thing that came from Attorney General Ken Paxton is this little wonderful piece. Liberal school districts are aggressively pushing LGBTQ views on Texas kids, all behind parents' backs. This is immoral and illegal. I will work with and for parents to hold deceptive sexual propagandists and predators accountable.
How anyone in this country can look at the things that he's saying and then go look a few hundred miles to the right and be like, the Florida bill is not about LGBTQ people, blows my fucking mind.
Yeah.
It is purposeful ignorance.
As a little bit of a middle finger to Ken Paxton, the city of Denton, Texas, passed a 5-2 ban on discrimination in housing, employment, and public accommodations based on a person's race, color, national origin, age, religion, disability, sex, sexual orientation, or gender identity. This now means that Denton, Austin, Dallas, Fort Worth, Plano, and San Antonio all have discrimination protections for LGBTQ plus citizens. So not all Texans.
Well, is he going to throw? Is there anything he can do about it? I'm just waiting for him to prove that he's not that this small government thing is bullshit.
Yeah. So yes, he can still take any one of those cities to court to argue that they violated the state constitution by creating a law that was in contradiction to the state law.
Mm-hmm.
Arkansas did that with the city of Fayetteville. Fayetteville also had enacted an anti-discrimination ordinance within the city, but the state attorney general here in Arkansas took the city of Fayetteville to court to challenge that.
How'd that go?
I do believe the courts ruled in favor of the state, so Fayetteville had to go back and rewrite it.
Small government. Local government. Christmas.
And for those of you who are wondering why we deal with this on a regular basis, with Don't Say Gay now being passed, Florida was just one of 15 states that had some form of Don't Say Gay legislation. So the worst is Tennessee's, where Florida explicitly called out instruction for kindergarten through third grade. It implies restrictions that could impact all grades. Tennessee's measure makes it sure that it is any students K through 12. The bill also uses language that describes LGBTQ youth as abnormal. The measure says that schools shall not locally adopt or use in the public schools of this state textbooks and instructional materials or supplemental instructional material that promote, normalize, support, or address lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transgender issues or lifestyle.
Here I am again, wondering how anyone can look at what's going on in the country and look that there is a identical bill in a different state that does say the quiet part out loud and
Mm-hmm.
say that Florida's bill is not about gay and trans people.
Exactly.
The gaslighting is fucking endless.
Right. So there's a Kansas bill that would make materials promoting homosexuality a misdemeanor under the state's obscenity law. Indiana would forbid teachers from talking about any LGBTQ related issues without parental permission. Oklahoma has 5 different bills to censor LGBTQ issues in classrooms. When we talk to you all about these things, this is not just a matter of, well, it is some other state. 15 states have some form of don't say gay or LGBTQ prohibitive language in them. This is a necessity, you know. We have to step up. We have to step out. We have to vote. We have to speak. We have to get in the face of people who are making these decisions and let them know this is not acceptable. Anything else, Marlon?
No, I'm just mad.
Okay.
Thinking of a TikTok.
Across the ocean on the great shores of the UK, Boris Johnson finally basically put his eggs all in one basket.
Is it the transphobic basket?
Uh-huh. Boris Johnson came right out and said, after calling for compassion and kindness for transgender people, said, when it comes to distinguishing between a man and a woman, the basic facts of biology remain overwhelmingly important.
I'm not transphobic, but
So Boris Johnson has not been very vocal about the issues that are going on right now in the UK. And yeah, basically just came right out and finally put himself firmly on the turf side of things. Yes.
do you want me to say something?
If you want to.
I don't know. His whole statement is not even true. Again, maybe you should have taken the Katanji Brown Jackson stance and said, I'm not a biologist, so I should shut my mouth about this.
Right. Yeah. Ready to move on?
Yep.
Okay. So going from the UK to the Ukraine. Sorry, old version of that. Over to Ukraine. When the conflict was building in Ukraine, there was an ordinance passed that made it illegal for any man between the ages of 18 and 60 to leave. Now, as a result of that, transgender women are being denied the ability to leave the country at the border. There are stories of transgender women that Ukrainian officials declare to be men and they are requiring them to remain within Ukraine and fight to fulfill the law. Trans people do have legal recognition in Ukraine, but it is an incredibly difficult process to get the accurate legal documentation. So, if a transgender woman still has the identification that marks her as male, then the government is using that to keep them from fleeing from the war-torn country. And it goes so far as a woman who has gone through, had her birth certificate changed to female on her birth certificate. She was still physically examined by border guards and was refused the right to enter Poland.
Damned if you do, damned if you don't. You know, Russia's targeting LGBTQ people. Ukraine doesn't care what the hell happens to them, it seems, since if you're a trans woman, they won't let you out, even if you have the correct documentation. And if you're a trans man, there's also been stories of trans men getting to the border and being told, I thought you wanted to be a man so much, turn around and fight.
Yeah. Which, neither of which are true, because there are women who are stepping up into the fight. We were talking last week about the death of an LGBTQ activist who decided she was going to stay and fight. And because of that, she was in a building that was bombed by Russian attacks. So there are women staying and fighting, but this is being used as essentially a hate crime to keep transgender people from fleeing the country under legal refugee status. We do have a news story coming out of Georgia. A 19-year-old transgender woman was shot and killed by her father, who then later turned the gun on himself. And the father had a history of violence, but even though he faced, punishment in the past, he was not prevented from having a gun. He was not prevented from having access to the gun. And tragically, Catherine Newhouse, who was 19 years old, was killed in her own parents' home.
I mean, I'm so tired of these stories, and it's disgusting.
I know.
I don't want to over politicize it.
Right.
But it just screams, and I've been wanting to talk more about this. It's just another example of, in some ways, of the privilege of individualism.
Mm-hmm.
We have trans people, and there are laws being passed against us, and based on either one trans person doing something bad or doing something good, winning something, or even the theoretical possibility of one trans person doing something. And then we have these men who are violent and using their guns left and right, pew-pewing, every school, every mall, every movie theater, their own home. And yet we never write laws that say no guns for cis men.
Right.
because again, we don't hold these people accountable for the actions of one, or in this case, the actions of hundreds,
Right.
thousands. But we as transgender people are held accountable for even a theoretical trans person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. We are, I mean, just like was being said about Judge Jackson had to prove herself to be perfect
Mm-hmm.
before she could even be given the opportunity to answer questions. They didn't even ask her questions through most of the Republicans didn't ask her questions through most of their grilling. It was, we're going to throw these things at you and we're going to see if we can make you crack.
Meanwhile, we had Beer McBeerson up there with his calendars sobbing like a baby, and they were like, this guy seems like he should be on the Supreme Court.
Something like that. One other death that we do want to take a moment and report is that of Tatiana LaBelle, 33. Titi LaBelle was from Chicago, and her death was at the literal hands of someone, and her body was disposed of in a trash can. Now, there is a message in all of these things. That message says that her life wasn't even worth trash. Okay? Somebody in a fit of passion beat her and threw her away. And that's why we need to remember her name. Tatiana was 33 years old, and we need to remember she was not trash. She was a beautiful human being. And she was one of our siblings. So, say her name and remember. How about we hop over to the religion, because I think you'll like this one.
Did you really think you're going to entice me with religion?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
So, for those of you who may know The Onion as a satire parody site, there is a Christian offshoot of that called The Babylon Bee. And I've seen many different comments from there. It's a satire site and basically just takes Christian themed items and creates satire from them.
Can I just say something?
Sure.
Nothing screams satire like Christianity. Like, who was like, you know who's good at satire? Evangelicals.
Yes. So, the Babylon Bee decided to write a tweet misgendering Admiral Rachel Levine after she was named Woman of the Year. And then that tweet was also linked to an article that continued to mock the Admiral. Seth Dillon, who is the chief executive of the Babylon Bee, said that Twitter had warned him that the site had broken its rules against hateful conduct and would be blocked from tweeting until the violative, that's a rough word for a Southern person, violative tweet was removed. His response. Twitter's statement to the media in response to our suspension: the account you referenced has been temporarily locked for violating our hateful conduct policy. The account owner is required to delete the violative tweet before regaining access to their account. And he responds, they could, of course, delete the tweet themselves, but they won't. It's not enough for them to just wipe it out. They want us to bend the knee and admit that we engaged in hateful conduct.
Good.
When cultural revolutions happen, the comics and entertainers are the first to be targeted by the revolutionaries. We have to bend the knee, kiss the ring, bow to the towering statue of LGBTQ politics when the trumpets play, or we stay on timeout indefinitely.
No, I need to go back here. No. Comics and entertainers often become the what would you even call it, the crack to sneak the hate in. They become a source, an easy source for you to be like, it's just comedy, it's just
Right.
entertainment. Early Nazi Germany comedy was a lot of Jewish caricatures and Jewish and anti-Jewish jokes. The propaganda films.
And that bled over into American popular media.
Yeah.
So that many of those tropes that were very European in origin became American tropes and are still being used to this day.
Yeah.
So, all right. So there was that bit of news. Shannon, I am not going to say that word again because you just want to make fun of me, okay? Look, I am from the South. The accent doesn't get any better the later I go. The New York City mayor, Eric Adams, pushed an appointee to resign after her history of extreme anti-LGBTQ rhetoric came to light. Reverend Catherine Barrett Lane of Reach Out and Touch Ministries was one of 9 people that the mayor had picked for the city's panel on educational policy. In nominating her, Adams had said that she spends her time inspiring people with her speaking and teaching in Bible studies. Just hours later, the New York Daily News published some of her comments about LGBTQ people, in which she compared homosexuality to pedophilia and said that being gay is one of many temptations that Christians face. Leaders struggle with the same temptations of drugs, alcohol, homosexuality, fornication, adultery, pedophilia, stealing, lying, envy, covetousness, and every other sin that the congregation struggle with. She wrote that prison inmates live in the grip of fornicating homosexual lifestyles. Barrett Lane also wrote in 2004 that her child told her that she was a boy when they were 3 years old, after the child was in the same room as a lesbian.
Make that make sense.
Yeah. Her and her husband began to militantly and violently pray for and with and over their daughter. We prayed against every spirit that was not of God, including the spirit of homosexuality. And at the end of that prayer, my daughter asked me if she was a girl.
Where do I find that? Where do I find that spirit?
When I told her yes, she happily began to sing and rejoice about being mommy and daddy's little girl.
How is that not the creepiest fucking thing you ever heard?
How is that not being investigated as child abuse?
Seems like they're forcing a gender on their child.
Yeah.
I want to know why this is different than the other 3 that he put up that were protested against. Is it because she's a woman? Is it because he got so much shit about the first 3 and he wasn't going to allow a 4th? in case no one knows, he appointed 3 men about a month ago, 2 months ago. One of them said that homosexuality is a mortal sin. One of them said that LGBTQ people are asking for too much acceptance. I believe it was that same one, or the one I just mentioned, that also was against putting up the victims of other victims besides Jews that were Holocaust survivors in Brooklyn's Holocaust Memorial Park, queer people, for example. And then the third and most egregious of all of them said that he very much supported, was it Uganda? I think it was Uganda. Uganda's stances on LGBTQ rights at a time when they were trying to make homosexuality a sin, or rather a crime punishable by death.
Yep.
And he elected these 3 people and was like, I think everyone deserves a second chance. Not in a position of power. They have to correct themselves first, then they get to be in a position of power. What about all the trans people who don't get a first chance, Eric Adams?
Yep.
Cannot believe this fucking city elected this man.
Right. He looked good on paper, I guess. Perhaps one of the greatest known churches in the world right now is the Hillsong Megachurch. And recently, the founder of that church, Brian Houston, resigned. And he resigned under the pressure of investigations that reported that he engaged in inappropriate conduct of serious concern. Now, this is kind of interesting. First of all, Brian Houston has turned Hillsong into a commercial monster house. They make money hand over fist going around and selling CDs and making concert that looks like worship services or something vice versa. Now, Houston, who is already been known to do something poorly, about 10 years ago sent inappropriate text messages to a female staff member. At the time, he was under the influence of sleeping pills, which he had developed a dependence to. He immediately apologized to the person and worked closely with the church to receive professional help and eliminate his dependency on the medication, and this was achieved successfully. Now, that was in about 2011, 2012. In 2019, it was found that Brian Houston became disoriented after a session at the Hillsong conference following the consumption of anti-anxiety medicine beyond the prescribed dose mixed with alcohol. He went up to the door of a hotel room thinking that it was his, knocked on it, entered into it, and spent some time with the female occupant. Last year, Brian Houston was charged with covering up a child sex abuse act committed by his father. So this individual is pretty much in a place where he has to step down from his position as the senior pastor of a church that he created. Now, here's where things get complicated. Because the Hillsong leadership released a statement and basically said Hillsong was birthed out of Brian and Bobby's obedience and commitment to the call of God, and we are extremely grateful for all that Brian and Bobby have given to build his house. We ask that you continue to pray for them and the entire Houston family during this challenging time.
You really
Basically,
want to say that this is the person that your entire institution is built on? Is that really the message you want to
right? Yeah. Um,
I mean, Liberty University kicked Jerry Falwell Jr. on his ass after he pulled this crap.
yeah. Now, Hillsong has been tagged as anti-LGBT. Brian Houston has been tagged as anti-LGBT, basically saying that I live by my own convictions and hold to a traditional thought on gay lifestyle and marriage. I do believe God's word is clear that marriage is between a man and a woman. The writings of the Apostle Paul are also clear, and Hillsong Church welcomes all people but does not affirm all lifestyles. So he is basically, made the church into an anti-LGBTQ association. So,
Because we're the sexual deviants.
right.
Right.
Yeah. So you have a pastor who was not once but twice guilty of substance abuse and sexual impropriety. But his ministry is still being lauded by the leadership of that church, and he is still being credited with all of the good things that he did in light of that. Excuse me one moment.
It's just, I don't know what else to say other than, and someone who's LGBTQ can do all the things that they claim to subscribe to, and they would still see them as sinful, but this guy gets a pass.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, other than the being against homosexuality, but they can be faithful, they can be, let's even say monogamous. Not that monogamy is by its is moral, instinctively. But they could stick to all this and still be considered not worth that church's,
Right.
time or respect. But this guy's allowed.
Yeah. And in many cases, we still have, people in positions of religious leadership who are allowed that.
Yeah.
And yeah, you're right. Now, flipping the table and talking about some religious leaders who are doing some good. 150 religious leaders from all across the globe were gathered together at a conference of the Global Interfaith Commission, and they were discussing LGBT plus lives. The faith leaders represented 30 countries, and different churches from those. And as they began to talk about things, what they did is that they agreed to 6 principles designed to protect LGBT plus religious folk. The principles are empowerment. We believe all individuals are made in the image of God, whom many call the divine, and should be free to live a life of dignity consistent with their sexuality and gender identity within their faith communities without fear or judgment. Prevention. We believe that we have a duty of care towards all LGBT plus people, and so we commit ourselves to listen to the experiences of our members who are LGBT plus in order to identify and eradicate any harmful practice that inhibits the flourishing of us all. Proportionality. We recognize that for too long, the needs of our LGBT plus members have often been ignored and sidelined, so we commit to ensuring that LGBT plus people are always given fair voice. Protection. We recognize that many LGBT plus people face significant discrimination, rejection, and hatred, so we commit to work to protect all LGBT plus people from harm wherever it occurs in both religions and secular contexts. Partnership. We recognize that for far too long, those of us who are LGBT plus have been excluded from decisions that impact our lives, so we commit to always work in partnership so that together we can prevent, detect, and report spiritual abuse. And finally, accountability. We believe that no one is above the law and that there must always be transparency in all areas of safeguarding, and so commit to work with our LGBT plus members to regularly monitor progress.
I don't have anything to say. Same thing as I had to say in Texas with that religious organization. It's just like, I love these people and I love what they're doing. I just question the impact.
I get it. I get it. So let's talk about impact. Sports. Here we go.
God,
Back to Florida. The one sports item that I wanted to bring out was Governor Ron DeSantis
fucking hell.
declared that after Leah Thomas's historic win at the women's college swimming event, DeSantis came out and declared that the second place competitor, who happened to be a Florida native, Emma Wyatt, was the rightful winner, and that he was going to see to it that Leah's championship was voided.
That ain't happening. You do not have that power.
Right? I know.
And blow hard. All I can think of is the race where she came in last, where she came in 8th, just being like to the girl who came in 7th, being like, "I'm sorry, honey, now you're last place. Ron DeSantis said so. Leah doesn't count."
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Oh my god. What nerve does he like? This is a Trump move. This is a Trump move of declaring things that you have no business and no power to declare.
Right.
Did the tournament even take place in Florida?
I do not believe so.
Great.
I'm not sure. I'm scanning this to see, but I don't think it took place in Florida.
Hey, most of the schools are Ivy League, so I assume not Florida.
Yeah, it was in Pennsylvania. And basically, I love how he wrote this in his tweet. He says, in Florida, we reject these lies. And we recognize Sarasota's Emma Wyatt as the best women's swimmer in the 500-yard freestyle.
Has Emma come up with a statement?
I don't know.
Check.
That would be interesting to see, though, wouldn't it?
Yeah, well, I'm afraid of what I'm going to get. Can't find anything.
Okay.
I did find an article from the Christian Post called Transgender Tyranny.
Oh, Lord.
How Emma Wyatt was cheated.
Of course.
Of course.
Now, you said you had another sports thing you wanted to bring up.
Well, it's not even a current article. It's just something I found in my research that I had never seen before, and I'm going to bring it up in a TikTok. I already made it. I'm going to drop it tomorrow at some point, I think, or maybe the next day. You know how they keep saying that women have no biological advantages over men in sports?
Mm-hmm.
Well, aside from that not being true or as much of a big deal as people believe it to be, the anecdotal evidence shows that women are better at endurance sports, especially extreme endurance sports, than men.
Mm-hmm.
And yet nobody's complaining about that.
Mm-mm.
Little suspicious. Don't you think? Also, they didn't need to do this study because any woman who has been with a cis man in the biblical sense already knows that they're not good at endurance.
I
You
have
heard
been
the joke here first, everybody. You'll see it on TikTok tomorrow.
I have been out genied by Marla. I credit you with
Thank you.
spiciness.
What's Chad saying?
Oh, very good, Marla.
Thank you. But also just a really I want to read out the whole thing. This researcher made this whole long Twitter post, basically a blog, that like broke it all down
Mm-hmm.
and included that article, and it was so brilliantly written. Like how anyone can read that and still be against trans athletes is just beyond me. I'm thinking about actually just reading it
Yeah.
as a TikTok and calling it a day.
Right.
Also, I cannot help but feel a certain amount of toward. There was a popular TikToker who recently made a bunch of transphobic, anti-trans women in sports videos, and I can't help but feel a certain amount of resentment that every trans woman who broke his argument apart got like okay views, and all the cis women I run across that broke his argument apart have like 200,000 likes on their videos, and I'm like, no one wants to fucking listen to us, do they?
No, they don't. No. And this is the thing that I think we have to own this. We do not have any authority to speak on our own experience. The moment we step up and say we are a transgender person, we invalidate any authority that we have after that. Because as of the moment we say that we are a transgender person, then we are basically an ideologue. And we are not sharing facts. We're not sharing truth. We're sharing opinion and propaganda.
Mm-hmm.
That is why they come into our sites. They know that their statements are opinion. But then they dismantle us by saying, that's your opinion.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not. These are facts that we state, whether we're talking about statistics or we're talking about DNA or we're talking about all of the possible variants of life that is known of. But we will not be given the authority to do that. And until we get dedicated cis allies who can have that authority, until they can step up and say, these are the facts. And we, as the transgender community, have to step aside and humbly allow our cis allies to take the lead in this case.
I have to tell you, despite not getting any credit, the videos I've seen of cis women ripping this person apart, they are all saying the same exact things that I have laid out as I've laid them out in my TikToks.
Right.
So it very truly feels like somehow that information's getting to them.
Right. Cats have ears. Being an ally doesn't mean you have to fight for us. Being an ally means that you have to use your privilege for us. We do not have the privilege of authority, but our cis allies do.
Yep.
And we require their assistance in that area.
And that's that's what's driving me nuts, especially from this person that everyone is now ripping apart. you can't just say you're pro LGBTQ and pro trans and then say a bunch of transphobic shit. That's not the way it works.
Right.
Like, you're not listening to us. You're speaking over us. You're speaking on things that you have no, you've researched nowhere near as much as, or understand the intent or the impact of it.
Right.
Because you don't have that lived experience. And the other thing about it, and I mentioned it in my video, but it's on my alt, so it didn't get as much traction, and so I might bring it up in something else. If you have spoken, first of all, you have to understand that these sports bills are purely there to other us, to demonize us, so that people can go farther with the laws against us.
Yes.
You know, that is why they're there. They're not there for fairness, because this is not an actual serious issue that is prevalent. If you're not trans, if you are cis, and you have spoken in the past month more about Leah Thomas than the 150 anti-trans bills that have been put up in this country in the first 3 months of 2022, you're not an ally. You are wearing that as a badge so that people can't call you transphobic and so that you think you look good. You don't, because I'll tell you right now, maybe the cis people can't see it, but we can all see right the fuck through it.
Right. And when I say cats have ears, when I say that cis people have authority, yes, they do have authority that we do not possess. They have the ability to step into their intellectual statements. They have the ability to step into their accreditations. They have the ability to step into their degrees or their fields of expertise. We do not. We don't get to step into those.
I literally gave who I won't say their name, but they better get a lawyer, a article this is way back at the beginning of this nonsense, an article about phenotype and diversity in nature and how it applied to transness, and the response was, a trans person wrote this. It's like the most well thought out thing I've ever read on the topic.
Yeah. Exactly.
But cis people are allowed to write about cis people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Again, this might fall under something resembling the privilege of individuality.
The privilege of default.
Yeah.
I mean, you said it.
Which they're not.
Right, but that is the privilege that they assume is the privilege of default. And so they take that on and they say, okay, everybody else has to fit into our setting.
Yeah.
All right, we got about 10 minutes left, so let's hit some entertainment news. The first one I think is a beautiful story that just needs to be shared because, first of all, I love this actress so much. Jamie Lee Curtis has announced that her second child is transgender, and she is going to be officiating the wedding. Jamie Lee Curtis issued a tweet that said, "Happy birthday, Ruby. I am proud to be your mom and am sending support to all trans families across the U.S. targeted by conservative legislatures, and I vow to use my freedom of speech to support my child and all trans children trying to live freely as who they are." The woman
I love the name Ruby. The name Ruby, reading that tweet for some reason gave me gender envy. I was like, that's such a good name.
It is. It is. Jamie Lee Curtis went on to expand on that tweet in an Instagram post saying, "This country was founded on freedom, a profoundly simple idea that everyone living here should be free to dream and achieve what they want freely. Our Declaration of Independence promises that we are endowed with certain unalienable rights, including life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to defy it to ensure safety and happiness. A profound idea, safety and happiness. She's awesome.
What can I add? Beautifully said.
Yeah. We mentioned Disney and how they have chronically screwed up on so much of what's happened in Florida with the Don't Say Gay bill. As of last Tuesday, Disney employees as well as celebrities and stars walked out at the company HQ in Burbank, and basically were just stepping out to say what Disney has done so far about the Don't Say Gay bill has been pathetic. And they wanted their company to be able to step up and provide more for the support of LGBTQ people in America, especially in light of everything that's been happening. In my opinion, go ahead. Go ahead, Marla.
Oh, no, I'm just going to say, good for them. Where's the plan to make it hurt? You know?
Yeah.
Don't go back to work until they do better.
Right.
Make demands. You know, production stops until you fix this.
Yes. This sends me back to the days when Walt was dealing with an animator walkout. It was at a point when Walt was pushing a lot to get work done, especially theatrical work, and the workers were just getting very, very worn out. They began to look at a unionization effort. Walt cracked down very heavily. They had to basically put their foot down and say, this is how it's going to be. We're not coming back to work. And Walt had to concede, which was not in his nature, to give in to that. And he was basically felt like he had been betrayed by the employees of the company. Now, at this point, I don't think Bob Chapek would feel that. I don't think Bob Chapek would care, because he has made every effort to not care to this point. And right now, the damage control that Disney is doing is ridiculously impotent.
Well, then some of those stars need to walk out as well.
Yeah.
Because they can't be replaced like
Right.
that. They're not going to find a new Hulk. Or maybe they will.
Yeah, they will. I mean, that's the sad thing, is they will replace actors. They've proven that they can. That's the thing. They think that they're too big to fail. Now, in what I believe to be an effort of performative justice, Disney released a statement that said that they would be working to repeal the Don't Say Gay bill. Bullshit. Our goal as a company is for this law to be repealed by the legislature or struck down in the courts, and we remain committed to supporting the national and state organizations working to achieve that. We are dedicated to standing up for the rights and safety of LGBTQ plus members of the Disney family, as well as the community in Florida and across the country. This was performative justice. This was performative effort, basically to try to make themselves look good. Disney is not going to do jack shit to get this done, because their lawmakers have already gotten their money.
Yep.
They don't have to do anything else. Even if they made an equal financial contribution to the efforts to repeal the law, it's not going to accomplish the damage, the amount of anything equal to the amount of damage that has happened because of this bill.
Mm-hmm.
It's, yeah, it sucks right now to watch Disney fall apart like this when it comes to LGBTQ plus inclusion. But again, we come to that statement of, do we boycott? Do we hit them in the pocketbook? And I want to say this. First of all, I do not speak on behalf of the Transverse or Emily or any of the programming. When I say this, I just say it as Genevieve Bergman, and I offer this up as my suggestion, and that is simply do what you feel you can. The idea of a boycott for some people is meaningless. For me, it is a personal statement when I choose to boycott something. And my use of it is not to impact the company. It is to remind myself that I have higher standards.
Mm.
And so I don't move to, ask the Transverse or any of its affiliated partners to join me in a boycott. I just don't do that. I just ask you to do what you can so that you remind yourself that you have higher standards. Because that's, in the end, is what's going to matter. It's not going to be whether or not Disney or Amazon gets their shit together. In the end, it's going to be, how do you feel about what you did? I don't shop Chick-fil-A. That's me. Okay? Will I still use Amazon? Most likely. Because I'm a broke ass person who doesn't have a whole lot of money, and sometimes Amazon's just cheap. Am I going to support Disney? There's going to be a very hard thought about that, because for me, I expect more of a company that was built on the dreams of somebody that I admire. His ideals for what this company could have been destroyed in this. And that's a very hard line for me to recognize. But I have to ask myself the question, what are the standards I'm wanting to live out? So there you go. That's what I got.
All right. I think that about does it, right?
I do believe so. We hit almost every news story, plus some, a couple of bonus. I want to remind you all, tomorrow night we have 2 shows, correct? On the schedule. We have all right, fine, violative. It's violative. All right. But we have 2 shows tomorrow night. One at there we go. There's the times right there. 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern, 1 a.m. Universal Time. And we hope that you'll come back for all of the other programming, including Behind Open Doors, which is moving to its new night on Thursday at 8 p.m. Central. So we hope you'll tune in for that. We want to thank you, everyone, for sticking with us and hearing what we had to say, being a part of this. And also, please share, let people know what we're doing here on Twitch. what we're doing through the Transverse. And if you didn't check out the Discord, I think it's still on there. But as for me, appreciate you all. Thank you so much. And Marla?
Good night.
We have a request to raid over to Gender Meowster, who is a great person and part of the affiliations that we have around the community. So I think that's a great idea. All right. Good night, everyone.